Hello, everyone. Dr. Nikhil Verma here again with another edition of Things I Didn't Learn in Med School. I had a lot of positive feedback from my most recent episode, and people were talking about, oh, wow, I learned a lot about, partnering with an ASC or why procedures are done in different facilities. So I thought it would be a good idea to continue the conversation about partnering with ASCs, ambulatory surgical centers. Partially because that's kind of where I'm at in my stage right now in my career, looking at different surgery centers, deciding if I have the opportunity to partner with them or if there are ones that are willing to partner with me. And there's also some long-term potentiation goals of what it might take for some of you out there that want to start your own surgery center. So it might be a good idea to start putting some of these thought processes in process to see what you need to do to get and achieve your goals. I wrote down a bunch of notes today, so I'm going to try to go point by point and walk through some of my experiences, and we can go from there. So I think the first thing I want to reiterate is what I talked about last time, is how effective and lucrative these surgery centers can be as a whole. And that's because of the facility fees that are associated that the insurers pay. Versus office-based procedure where you don't get those same facility fees. And I think that's probably the best starting off point, because some surgery centers are single specialty surgery centers. And it can also be just a single provider or single group of providers. For example, physical medicine rehabilitation, pain management, could open up a pain surgery center and have access to it. And of course, there's guidelines and benchmarks and certain things that are required from the state and the national governments. And as long as all those things are qualified, then you can consider yourself a surgery center, and then you can start billing for those facility fees. I know of a colleague here in Columbus who is starting his own surgery center. I've talked to him a few times, and he's real excited about that. So, and I know of other places that people have done similar things. Now, it takes a lot of money and a lot of capital to do this. So, one of the ways to mitigate that upfront costs are partnering with a private equity group who can help provide some funding, and they take a percentage of the collections over the years. You can also raise capital from colleagues and other individuals in the area that might be interested and might be opportunistic for some capital, some gains from their capital of investing into the surgery center. Another reason or another thing I want to comment on is one of the reasons why these things are becoming so more popular over the years is because I think first is nobody wants to go to the hospital for a long extended stay. If you can do something in a surgery center and get in and out, I think that's better for the hospital system. We're not crowding the hospital system. I think it's better for the patient and getting them in and out and getting more attention and more care. And the ease of access of recovering at your home, if you can, instead of at a hospital where there's risk of infection, it can be loud, sleep can be disturbed. Sometimes you might not get the attention that you need just because the staff is overwhelmed and overworked and covering other things. So just some things to think about. I also think that these big hospital systems are not as utilized for these outpatient procedures or outpatient surgeries. Another thing is there's surgery centers out there that are working towards possibly doing like an overnight stay. So it doesn't necessarily have to be open just during the day, but they'll have an overnight stay. So there can be a 23-hour observation. So that's another concept that why these things are going the way they're going. And then I think another concept is, or another thought process is having these available more readily throughout different areas. With that being said, one thing that anyone considering joining an ASC or starting their own is they need to understand if their state is a CON or Certificate of Need Surgery Center. Actually, I don't exactly know all about that. Let me look it up. Not to belittle too much and pause too much, I think I could probably talk about certificate of need at a later date, or I can add a shorter video about this later, because I just want to kind of get through this without going too much into it. But long story short, a certificate of need is something that might be required from the state. That is this a facility that we actually need to put somewhere, or are we kind of already oversaturated and we're already good with that discipline? So that's something you need to look into. Each state's different, and each state has a different law based on it. So those are so just a concept of where the ASC system is and where it's going. Now that we're going to more and more advanced procedures, less invasive, more robotics, more micro incisions, more endoscope, all these things can really help justify the reason why we're moving more towards that direction. So let's just kind of walk through some systems of where you're at. So initially, when you're starting in your practice, or you're already maybe in your practice, and you want to start talking to an ASC, and you want to start offering procedures at that surgery center, the first thing is the surgery center wants to make sure that you, as a physician, are going to be able to provide enough volume for it to make financial sense for them and financial sense for yourself as well. By the Medicare guidelines, that if you're invested in a surgery center, at least 1/3 of your profits, or at least 1/3 of your cases, I should say, should need to go to that surgery center. And the reason they say this is because they don't want a physician just to be owned into a surgery center and referring to a doctor friend that works at that surgery center and just pumping out surgeries without that doctor actually doing. So let's take this back. So for me as an interventionalist, doing procedures like epidural blocks, and I have a neurosurgery friend, and we're both invested in the same surgery, and then I do all my procedures in the office for that extra money, but I know he's going to do procedures at a surgery center that we're both invested in. So if I start sending all my patients to him anyway, and he does all the surgeries, then I'm just sitting here cashing in money. So it kind of gets into a little dicey situation of getting a bunch of money for not doing anything that is invested. So that's one of the anti-Stark laws, anti-kickback laws that's in place. There's several of them. There's 3, 4, 5 of them. I'm not sure of all of them, but that's one of the big ones that is always harped upon. There's definitely tons of websites. I'm kind of flipping through some of them over the past few hours over that. So yeah, that's one thing that you should keep in mind. And there's other ones that you should definitely keep in mind as well. But not the full focus of this video. Again, maybe when I do that certificate of need, I can walk through the 4 or 5 anti-kickback laws that are involved as well. So as I was saying at the beginning, the volume needs to be there for a surgery center and for provider to make mutual sense as an agreement. The next thing is who's the owners of the surgery center? Is it a private equity group with a board? Are there physicians on the board? Are there other staff on the board, like nurses and other administrative staff? Or is it all said and done by just the administrative board of the private equity group? Or is it just full of physicians? It's typically going to be a hybrid for the most part, but it could really go any way, and I don't see why it wouldn't. And that's something that you should put into consideration if that's where your goal is, and see which one is going to be best for you. Are you going to be able to work with the board? Are they going to be able to be amenable to your decisions, to your recommendations? Are they helpful for you and the staff? Do they care about the patient first? Is that the most important thing for them, or is profit the most important thing? These are some other things that are on my consideration when looking into it. I think patient satisfaction and patient experience should be pretty high up there. So that should also mean are there good physicians working at that surgery center? Are they reputable individuals? Are they certified in what they're doing, at least fellowship trained, have good experience, have good patient outcomes. If you have a physician that could possibly potentially be, a doctor death situation and end up causing lots and lots of harm for patients, then it doesn't only reflect bad on you because you're an owner of the surgery center, but now the surgery center can also be potentially be sued because some things weren't appropriately handled. Now, more than likely, this just the physician would be sued, but still, you could be seen as a communication or an affiliation that could reflect poorly on someone else. Are there standards in place at that surgery center to make sure that these things don't happen? Are there checks and balances? Are people checking up to make sure that you're doing and you're credentialed in what you're offering? All surgery centers are required to make sure that there aren't post-op infections or post-op complications. You sign off on them every week or every month, whatever might come for you. And they have systems of checks and balances there. With that being said, I think it's a good transition to say that there are surgery centers out there that work very hard with Medicare and Medicaid and other servicing private payers, and they will offer some sort of reimbursement for everyone involved if you hit certain standards. So, for an example, there's a surgery center here in Columbus that if you hit the certain standards, which are pretty minimal, they're kind of built into your note already, and as long as the rest of the staff is doing their appropriate jobs, and it's really not more extra work. It's like maybe one or two check boxes. It's just a few extra lines in your note that are, I discussed with the patient the risk and the benefits is what you already should be doing. Not only before the procedure, but the day of and after. But they will offer a bonus for this, and that the bonus comes from the payer, and it gets distributed to the physicians or the other owners in the surgery center. I think we talked about staffing. I think that's important. Is there a good staff? We don't want problematic staff. I know physicians are under a full, a lot of stress, but and the surgery centers, the employees and the administrator there can also be under a lot of stress. And this can also lead to a scenario that can cause a lot of turmoil and angst, and I don't want to work with that person. And, that's not a conducive environment, especially if we want to help our patients. Now, I can honestly admit I've been guilty of things of this in my past because when you have overwhelm and a lot going on, and then the surgery center is asking for X, Y, and Z, sometimes it's easy to get short with them. But I always try to come back and apologize and admit my fault. Give me 1 second. This phone's ringing. Just put you on pause. Okay, sorry about that. So another thing is to look into is the contract that is established from the ASC and the physician. What are the pros? What are the cons? Are there other things in there? Are there non-competes? Non-competes can be very huge because there are practices and individuals that are big enough to be invested in several surgical centers in an area. So all that can be beneficial for you as an individual, but you need to make sure that there's no non-competes that would limit you from investing in several surgery centers. Another big thing is the contracts that the surgery center has with the payers. Are they at par with national average, or are they above? Are they providing care that these payers will support and get behind? Are they renegotiating these contracts when those contracts are up for renegotiation? So those are a lot of things to put into play and think about. And those are very, very valuable questions to ask when you're going through these processes. The facility itself, is it a newer building with all the gadgets? Is the equipment there up to date? Is it suitable for you and your needs? Is the lounge area appropriate for physicians? Some surgery centers will have really fancy lounges with food and nice comfortable chairs, et cetera, et cetera. Others will have just a basic, staff area and nothing extra or separate for physicians or anyone else. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I think everyone's individual in these situations. Obviously, you want to have a feel like you're having a VIP experience if you are invested into something that should be a profitable thing. And I think most people would enjoy that, but also part of me would be like, listen, I'm here to work and I want to get my things done and I want to appreciate my time. I want to appreciate the staff. As long as all that stuff is going well, we can take care of our patients, make sure they have the best experience, and then I can suffer on either end. So again, I think that's more a personal decision. And I've seen it both ways. I've worked in several surgery centers throughout fellowship and now as an attending. So, it's just something that should be said. Next would be the charting and EHR systems that is involved. What does it take to get a patient scheduled? Is that easy? Is that a difficult process? I'm trying to make it easy for me by just having one form that I can send out with my medical record system from my own one. But most surgery centers are having me print off a form, fill things out, and then fax it to them. It's not necessarily hard work. It's all stuff that you already know. It's like allergies, insurance, CPT codes, ICD-10 codes, medications, blood thinners, that kind of stuff. Now, I think it's important to have those things, but I also get frustrated, and this is one of the things I'm talking about, is like all this information is already in the note that I send over to the surgery center, so they should just be able to derive the information from that. Again, I think this is a moot point, and I don't know if there's a JCO regulation that requires a surgery center to do this, and that might be why. But if there isn't, then I'm trying to get on a front horse and like, let's eliminate this extra paperwork that's just wasting everyone's time. It's already in there. Let's just derive it from that, or make a new form that's easier to be sent instead of this antiquated faxing system. And I don't know, maybe there's some tech people out there, like that would be something that's worth the time to look into, because all this data is already into our medical record systems. If we could derive a form out of it and send it out, I think that would just save so much headache for thousands of physicians throughout the U.S. Sorry for the little rant there. Let's continue. Charting at the surgery center. A lot of surgery centers still use paper, so you just sign all the paperwork before the procedure. And some use a tablet system. I forget what the system's called, but you can just type, you kind of do check mark, electronic sign, check mark, type in, all that kind of stuff. So, those are some different charting systems. But for me, where volume matters more than doing these extra 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes of work between patients can get burdensome when you're doing 20 or 30, or in some cases 50 procedures in a day. I don't do 50 procedures in a day, but I do know of some physicians, some pain doctors that do. So, if you're doing that plus 2-3 minutes of charting that's extra, that could be mainstreamed or fast lined in an appropriate way, you're spending an extra 150 minutes a day at a surgery center just with charting. So that's just something to be said, to think about. And with where technology is today and where it's going, I think all this will be more mainstreamed and quicker, just a quicker process. And I think we just need to figure out and work with it. I understand there's JCO guidelines that require this, but I feel like there has to be an easier way, and we're just not thinking hard enough or have the right people thinking hard enough about it. Something I should have talked about earlier, but I think it's probably fine to talk about it now, is, what is the price per share to enter into the surgery center is something else to consider. Does it cost $2,000 a share? Does it cost $125,000 a share? Those are, really big financial decisions. Now, you can usually take a physician loan into these positions, and it's appropriate to do so, and the dividends will probably pay for itself in the long run. But it is a financial decision to make, and if you don't have that free cash and you have to take a loan, you really have to weigh those options. With that being said, what you need to look into is seeing the financials of the surgery center and what they've distributed over the past 3 months, past quarter, past half year, past few years, because that's going to really make the determining factor of, is this going to be financially responsible decision for you. Most of these surgery centers won't disclose that information, though, until you show them you've had enough volume, and then you sign a non-disclosure agreement and take a look at the financials. So that's something that everyone kind of battles, but you just need to show your volume. You need to show that you're worth what you're offering to the surgery center. So just keep that in mind. And that's, again, a situation where I'm at right now. There are some surgery centers that might not, especially the ones that are newer and trying to build up. They might want you to get in, so they're going to show you the projections. They're going to maybe show you what they've done in the past 3 months, 6 months, and they might show you what their projected are for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So again, something to consider that people might not. Some other concepts of the managed care contracts. Again, this is Medicare, Medicaid. Some things that to look at are they accepted at the surgery center? Is it financially responsible? Some procedures, and especially newer procedures, are only covered by certain entities and experimental in others. So that's something to put into consideration. Which also reminds me, is another thing you need to put in consideration is the patient's financial consideration, because doing an office-based procedure, there's typically no facility fee associated with that. So the insurance is going to pay what they pay, or if they haven't hit their deductible, the patient pays out of pocket, and that's fine. But if you take them to a facility, such as a surgery center or to a hospital, that same facility fee could be in the $700, $800, $900,000 range. So if the patient hasn't hit their deductible, they're paying a lot of money out of pocket just to get their procedure done. And that's not, and on top of that, you're going to add the physician fee of what you actually do. Now, this is something that I will love to talk about with anyone, and it's something we're going to expand and talk about, is how these big surgery centers, big hospital centers, and other places are potentially causing worse American healthcare value, because they are the ones that get so big and say, oh, we're the only facility in this area that can offer this. So they jack their prices up for the insurance companies. So I'll give you an example, and I'm not going to say name by name, but there is a big entity in the Central Ohio area. Series of 3 epidurals for the patient was $21,000 billed. Now, an epidural does not cost that much. It just shouldn't. I have a resource of cash pricing for an epidural should be around $500. Could be more, could be less, but you're talking $21,000. Now, some of that goes to the anesthesia, some of it goes to the facility group, but now you can kind of see where we're at in the healthcare world, where these backdoor negotiations that have nothing to do with physicians, nothing to do with patients, and it's the people, the insurance companies, making deals with the hospital systems and driving these prices up. And we can talk about it more another day, but I just want you guys to kind of be aware of that. Something else to consider when joining a surgery center is, what is the physician groups that are in there? Is it all orthopedic surgeons? Is it a mix of orthopedics and GI physicians with eye surgery and hand surgery? These are all things to think about. And you want to know generally what those RVUs, if you remember my last video, we talked about what those RVUs and what the value of those procedures are. Now, we can't do these heavy brain surgeries in these surgery centers. You can't do large cardiothoracic surgeries quite often in these surgery centers. And some of these large spine cases or big orthopedic cases that might require more of a hospital stay. But those are just some things to think about as well. Just considering what type of procedures you can bring to a surgery center and what makes financial sense. Let's see. The surgery center coding, do they have a good billing and coding team? Are they billing and coding appropriately? Are they doing it on time? I had conversations earlier in my earlier series about revenue management and revenue cycles, and might be worth time looking back and looking into those. But yeah, that's important stuff, because if you're not getting your payments on time, then it can be frustrating for sure. Collections as well. Are you sending your patients to collections, et cetera, et cetera. Accounts receivable, again, similar process. Are you getting paid on time? The appeals process, like if something gets denied post case or you don't get paid for it, what kind of support system, what kind of system is there to try to get that money back? Not to get the money back, but to fix the note and fix the procedures and put in the right diagnoses to get that finances back into the system. Physician support, very important. Do you have a good point of contact? Someone that you can rely on, someone you can talk to if you have issues. You hate going to the board for every minor issue. You hope there's good business operator management that you can walk to. This brings up a couple of good points, because during my fellowship, I would quite often go talk to the I would just say the business manager, the surgical center manager that's kind of on the floor day to day, and just kind of bounce ideas off them. It's like, hey, we noticed that we were having a little bit issues with a few things. I think it would be helpful to have a whiteboard in both the rooms. And I was like, yeah, we didn't really think about that. So the very next week, someone went out and bought some whiteboards and put them up there instead of just posting the procedures on a doorway. And then we just kept evolving these small ideas. And I think it was good that they were taking my advice, even as a fellow at that point. And we're just making processes smoother and quicker and helping people out. And that way, the patients aren't sitting at the surgery center longer or really confused about what's going on. So there's just, it's a good system to make sure they have someone you can trust and bring these situations to, and not in an argumentative way, but as suggestions, and someone that's going to work with you. Like we talked about the capital structure to the facilities, payment rates, operating expenses. That's really important. Are you operating at a higher expense than the rest of the national average, or are you operating at a more a cheaper expense? How lean are you running? They say anything below 30% is running the lean practice or lean surgery center. I don't know if I have enough experience to say that confidently, but there's some places that run 50% pumping it back into their staff and advertising and that kind of stuff. So, that's, everyone is different, but if you're looking for more bang for your buck, you probably want a cheaper or a lower operating expense. But if you want the VIP experience, which I think I would want as a patient, and as when I do send to a surgery center, I would want them treated very well and with a VIP experience, maybe it's okay to justify spending more in operating expense. Couple other things that I'm just looking at. The management team, we kind of talked about a value at every stage. Are you getting value from the second that you're going to send a patient there to the minute that they're going to leave the surgery center, and are they going to have a good experience, et cetera, et cetera. So, that was the list of things that I had written down. I think this one, like I said, is something I'm going through right now. I don't know if I've brought enough volume to these surgery centers yet. There are some things that I don't have enough information about, and got to do my homework. Learning about the CON of Certificate of Need, learning about those anti-kickback laws. I always hear what people say when they say it to me, and I know what they mean kind of, but a true test of your knowledge is, can you sit down and write this out and explain to someone? And that's something that failed right now, but I'm going to go learn about it, and hopefully I'll be able to help you guys learn about it too. Anyways, I hope you guys are finding this stuff useful. It's starting to become a project that I'm doing every week, and I want to continue to do it. And if you guys think of things that you want to hear about, please message me. Instagram, Dr. NV Sports and Spine. Message me on LinkedIn, or drop a comment on the YouTube channel. Just really looking forward to the next steps. I talked about some other things we're going to look into is financial advice. I'm probably going to run through 10 books that I recommend to medical students, residents, fellows, anyone in medicine. And then something that's really cool, or I think is cool, is like 10 books about the human emotion and how we can interact with patients better at a higher level. Those might come a little bit later, but I'm compiling the list right now. I think it'll be a good conversation to have. And also, again, I'm going to have a bunch of people start interviewing people in the next few next few weeks, and get those interviews up as well. And, really just take this to the next level. Yeah. Anyways, subscribe, give me a like, drop me some comments, some questions, and look forward to helping you guys out and hope you're learning. Take care.